Hello and welcome back to another video. So when I did my 2 weeks in impressions of Warlords of Draenor, I said that at a later date I would revisit the topic and give you updated thoughts, and that's what I'm going to be doing today. Before we get into the main video though, I think it's really important to just say what my position is as a whole, because I think it's just worth knowing that before you hear the rest of the things that I have to say. So overall, my position on Warlords of Draenor patch 6.0 is very positive. I think it's been a better launch than Cataclysm had, than Mists of Pandaria had, and well, when you're going back as far as Wrath of the Lich King and the Burning Crusade, that was just a long time ago. It was a different time and I think a different game. So I'd say that this has been the best launch sort of patch, or best expansion at launch that we've had in recent memory, which is totally a good thing. Now in the rest of the video I will be talking about some of the bits where I think, it lacks a little bit, but overall I do have a very positive impression. Though I do think that it is actually rather clear that, with all of the delays, at some point I think Blizzard just said, look guys, screw it, we need to just shore up this patch, and we need to launch the game. I think 6.0 probably could have done with a few more months of work, or a few more weeks of work even, just to flesh out some of the content and make some of the systems a little bit more interesting. There's also a lot of hotfixes and things that happened between launch and now, which I think many of which were sort of clear design things that they didn't really think about. It's, yeah, sure, maybe they could have done with a few more weeks, but given the circumstances, I'm actually surprised at how well they polished it up and got it out there. And I think it ties into a prediction that I made way back during the beta period over the summer. I said that Warlords of Draenor is going to be absolutely fantastic for the first month and a half, and I also said that it's going to review extremely well because of that. When we, fast forward to now, the game reviewed fantastically, got 90s and very, very high scores all over the place, which was lovely to see, and it was extremely fun and compelling for the first month and a half. But I think now, where maybe, it's starting to slow down a little bit, which is fine, is what is expected. I think that period of extreme fun perhaps could have lasted for a little bit longer if the patch had a little bit more time to be worked on. However, it's all overall, look, it's worked out pretty well. But what I really am looking forward to is patch 6.1. Now, this would be a patch that I'd say would happen in maybe January or February. The reason I say that's because generally they do a kind of mid-raid tier patch. They've been doing that since Mists of Pandaria. We had 6.1, or 5.1 even, and 5.3, so I'm really looking forward to what they're going to do in patch 6.1. Currently, we know that it's going to be based in the main world of Draenor, so that probably means it won't be Tanan Jungle. And other than the details that I talked about in a video a few days ago, we don't know a great deal about the kind of lore and setting and stuff of what we're doing. Anyway, so that's just the overall thoughts and stuff covered. Time to talk about some of the specifics, especially the things that I think have maybe evolved since the initial video. So, for Highmaul. Obviously I've got a lot more time with Highmaul now, and I've got to say that I think it is one of the best introduction raid tiers to any expansion. The bosses are fantastically designed, and I think what's really nice about them is, they're fun, they've got clear mechanics, and they're not stupidly complicated. And the reason why I say that, by the way, I do look forward to the really, really complex fights later on in Blackrock Foundry, but I think that just as an introduction tier, it does, or raid even, it has to be a little bit different. It needs to be sort of accessible, and it needs to have mechanics that are well catered to learning. I think it does a superb job of that. Kargath teaches you good lessons. Butcher, I think, is an extremely fun fight, especially when Frenzy hits, the healers maybe start to struggle a little bit, and I'm one of the ranged who's involved with coordinating the stack sizes, so there's a lot for me to do there, and I just find that's really quite engaging and fun. Then for Brackenspore, again, yeah, it's not a massively hard fight, but you're learning things, it's fun, well, okay, maybe you're not learning things, but I suppose for a new player, you'd be learning things about ads, and I think there's some fun gameplay going on there, and really that theme does continue with all the fights, with perhaps Tectus being one of my favorites. I know that a lot of people seem to, hate Tectus, but I think he's just so much damn fun. Like, there's mad stuff going everywhere, and everyone remembers that, that moment when there's a shard up, and there's 4 moats, and all you hear is, what's it that... Crap, I've forgotten what he says, something about the earth rising, and then like 5 giant pillars just like pop up and nearly murder the raid, and that stuff's really fun. So I think Highmaul's really, really good on normal and heroic difficulty. I haven't tried Mythic yet, and it probably won't be for a while until we do that, but I've got hopes anyway. Now, on the topic of LFR, I know that this is a bit of a controversial topic. The last time I talked about LFR, that video was kind of controversial. I am happy enough with the decision to make LFR that little bit easier, because I just think that from a design perspective, in the old mop, LFR, you didn't learn that much. The personal difficulty was still extremely easy. However, the personal difficulty didn't match up with success rates, which just made this extremely, I think, frustrating environment that often got more toxic than it needed to be. I just don't think it was a very healthy thing for the game. And I'd say that if you were an LFR player back then, it wouldn't hurt you to give normal a go. You'll be able to pug the first few bosses, and I think it will be an experience that you'll really find to be enjoyable. Even if you traditionally are not really into raiding, I do encourage you to give it a go, because it's a lot of fun, and the first few bosses are not really that stressful on normal difficulty. Anyway, so I'm pretty happy with LFR, and it's just a fun little loot grab thingy, and of course if you want to do harder raiding, Blizzard have made that even easier with a fantastic group finder, which I still think does need a little bit of work. I like more filtering options, and basically if they would just look at OQ and Open Raid and take some more hints from how they do things, that would be lovely. Now that the LFR has been covered, it's time to talk about dungeons. So dungeons are, I think, really good so far, but one thing that I've noticed in the last while is that the dungeoning experience ends extremely quickly with Warlords of Draenor, because you get gear from so many sources between crafting things, BOEs, LFR, the Garrison missions, just, there's a lot of ways to get gear, Apexis as well, PvP, and because of all that stuff, you're through with dungeons very, very quickly. I mean, I hardly even needed to do any dungeons on my main character, because I was very efficient with getting other bits of gear. Certainly though, if you do want to just gear up purely via dungeons, I do recommend that. It's a lot of fun. However, in general, you are through with dungeons pretty quickly, and I think that's sort of unfortunate, because it is some of the most fun content that's in patch 6.0. They truly are some of the best dungeons Blizzard have ever made, in my opinion, and it's a little bit sad that you're done with them so quickly. So it's a little bit unfortunate that the dungeons have been done with so quickly, but for what they were, still very fun, and I'm doing them on alts and all that stuff. Next, it's time to talk about PvP. This was something that I didn't cover in my previous video because I hadn't tried it. I think that PvP gearing in terms of honor is extremely fun. I like the lockbox system, and I really enjoy the Gladiator Sanctum. I think all that stuff's really good. Conquest, though, is a little bit of a different story. Personally, I find Conquest to be pretty fun and rewarding. However, that's because I've been able to get a decent amount of Conquest without actually doing formal rated PvP, which I guess is a little bit problematic. Though in general, I'm sort of okay with being able to gear up a little bit within the cap via doing that stuff, because ultimately, if you're a super hardcore PvPer, it should all just be about people with equal gear going in and competing in a fair playing field and seeing who's the most skilled player. That's always what I believe PvP is best at. However, one thing that I think is perhaps a little bit of a problem with PvP, and correct me if I'm wrong here, I haven't experienced this, but I've heard people say that apparently you can, just with the various ways of you getting randomly a piece of Conquest gear, and that it's a bit ridiculous, because someone could get maybe 3 bits of Conquest gear, which could be 3 or 4, or maybe even 5 weeks worth of Conquest caps, which has created this bizarre gear disparity between players in PvP. So that does seem rather problematic. I don't know enough to talk about it in too much depth, but it does seem a little bit wonky, so I thought it was worth mentioning here. Now, with all those things covered, it's time to talk about gearing up in general. I think it's fast, I think it's fun, I think it's rewarding. However, it's not perfect. I think the stats are a bit of a mess. I don't think the new stats that they added are particularly interesting, and perhaps I'll cover that at some point in its own video. In terms of other things, let's see, the Apexis crystal system, I think, is still not particularly great. Those dailies are just not a great deal of fun to me. I'm sorry, they're not. I think they're boring. They're like a chore that I do every day. Are they as bad as the patch 6, or not 6.0, the patch 5.0, crazy daily situation? No, they're not that bad. They're not awful, they're not literally Hitler, but, they're not great, okay? This is more that it's a bit of mediocre content in an otherwise very solid experience, and I think that just makes it stand out, and perhaps, it's just, I don't know, I don't think it's that great. Honestly, I think the price of Apexis gear is still a little bit too expensive. I remember when I talked about that a while ago, actually, a lot of people said I'm leaning on it too heavily. I disagree, I don't think I'm leaning on it. I've got 1 bit of Apexis gear in my main, and I haven't been doing those missions on my other characters because, well, I ain't got time for that at all. I just don't think it's particularly good. There's definitely a lot of work they could do to those outdoor miniature Timeless Isle style things to make them more compelling, because right now you just go there, you kill some mobs, and I don't think it's that compelling, to be frank with you. Now, the Garrison missions are another thing, I'll just talk about them in relation to gearing. I think that they're generally fun enough. I'm still not particularly cool with the idea of getting anything beyond normal raid gear from them. I think I understand the principle of getting normal raid gear from the Garrison missions. It really does help players who are not able to raid normals immediately. It does help them kind of catch up and get into raids, and I think that's great. But giving gear that's heroic or mythic, I think is just too much. I don't like that being there, but I think that what matters to the majority of people is just being able to get that normal gear to get them into raiding, and I'm totally cool with that being a thing. Then for the item level 645 randomized stuff, again, I think that's generally okay. It's just a little bit better than LFR, and it's a fun little thing that can pop up, and again, sort of reward you for just, I don't know, existing and getting into the game. I suppose it's a bit problematic, the idea of being rewarded for existing. I suppose it's not technically that, because it is tied into the follower system and all that stuff. But I think that what's nice about the gearing up in Draenor in comparison to previous patches is in previous patches what you did is you did a daily dungeon every day to get your Valor points, and then every 2 weeks you bought a bit of gear. That was very deterministic, and I don't think it was as fun. Right now in Draenor, at least, you can do the Apexis stuff. You can craft some gear, you can do your missions to get gear, you can do invasions to get gear. There's more variation there, I think that's great. I wish they would fix up some of the randomized stats stuff, because I think that's messy. And if you're doing randomized stats without reforging, it just means that if you get a terrible bit of gear, well, even if it's got a high item level, it's terrible, and that makes players feel bad. So imagine if your 645 bit of mission gear that you very rarely get ends up being a dud with crap stats that's worse than your bit of heroic dungeon gear. That doesn't feel good, right? That just feels like the game kind of dangled a carrot in front of you and then took it away, which isn't always great, especially if it's to do with a sort of time-limited and limited availability thing, like one of those rare Garrison missions. But whatever, I think gearing up in general, it still holds up pretty well. Now let's talk about Garrisons as a whole. So, I think Garrisons are odd. They're definitely a lot of busy work, I find. A lot of my gameplay just revolves around log on to every character, make sure to harvest my herbs. I couldn't be bothered harvesting ore anymore. I've got so much, and the market price for ore is just terrible, and I hardly even use it anyway. But a lot of it just comes down to, do those things, fulfill my work orders, take my characters out to the ground to hunt some beasts to get savage bloods, then go back, click my buttons on my add-on to do all my Garrison missions. And then every week ensure that I get the random follower for every character from the inn, etc, etc, etc. It's a big long list of busy work, and I suppose it's rewarding busy work that sometimes ties into decently fun gameplay, so that works out quite well. But again, I just think the Garrison could be made better. I will do a video on that at some point, because it's really something that I would need to sit down and think for a few hours and just write out some good ideas first. But yeah, I do think Garrisons could be improved. Now, just to talk about specifics, I think the Garrison buildings in general are fine, but I would just like some more functionality from some of them. Maybe a few more buildings would be nice, and perhaps a extra medium slot would be cool as well. The buildings, though, I suppose, do serve as a decent template for the future, and hopefully they, manage to make some good stuff. Now that that's covered, let's talk about followers. So, the follower system is something that I've basically min-maxed since my last video. I'm just getting loads of followers with epic mounts from the inn, and then leveling them up to max, and giving them full sets of armor. And really, on my main, all of my characters, or all of my followers, are very well leveled up. They're all level 100, most of them are epic, and I've got item level 645 plus characters for every single trait. So now that system has basically been won, in a way, it's just a matter of going onto that character, sending everything in missions, and collecting my free rewards, which is fine, I suppose. Then on my other alts, again, the follower stuff just, it's not particularly interesting. I've never thought it was that compelling, because I don't think it's great. A lot of people said to me on my add-on video, you're not getting any fun out of this because you're not immersing yourself in the story and kind of the lore and the idea of this follower system. And my reply to that would be, I can immerse myself in something that I actually have got gameplay with, that I'm doing with my character. I don't think that interacting with a menu can be that immersive. I think that it's an inherently mediocre and not very immersive way of interacting with a game system. And, you know what? As much as there is a terrible stigma with it, look at what where its lineage is with. This is the sort of thing that Facebook games have done. It's the sort of thing that iOS games have done. It's the sort of thing that Assassin's Creed Brotherhood has done, and it kind of, I suppose, kicked off that idea a little bit. I don't think it's an amazing system, but as far as those systems go, I think it's one of the better implemented ones. I think that the various traits can be fun, and it does feel quite good to match up a mission perfectly. Initially when you get your first few followers leveled up to a decent item level, and then you can start doing the harder missions, that stuff does feel fun, it does feel rewarding, and I guess that's good. I just think that it's a system that inherently is not particularly mind-blowing. So that's that. As for the missions themselves, I think they're decent. I'd like more variation between the different kinds of missions. I've currently, I've got the patrol missions unlocked via the barracks, and I've also got the treasure hunter missions, which were covered in, I don't know, maybe it was yesterday's video, maybe it's a few days ago, I don't know when this one will go up. And I think that stuff's generally fun, the missions are as good as they can be in a way. I just wish there was some way of tying those missions into stuff that you could do on your character. But I guess there isn't, so whatever. Again, it just ties into followers. It's a mediocre system that is well polished and well implemented. Next, invasions, I think, are a cool idea. They're kind of neat, but they're too easy. And the rewards at the end, bar the chance of getting nice gear, are kind of boring. I think there should be maybe 1,000 Apex's crystals for getting a gold, and then maybe 750 for a silver and 500 for a bronze. I think that would feel a lot better, and it would make people care about getting them. I don't think that actually generating invasions is fun. You just have to go out and grind mobs, or selectively do those Apex's mission daily quest thingies. I just don't think that's a very compelling system, but there's a good sort of foundation there, and hopefully in patch 6.1, when they add a harder version of the invasions, which they said they'll add, they'll be a lot more fun, because right now, even on gold, it's not that it's difficult content, it's just, can you do it fast enough? And while that's fine, I would like something that was an actual true challenge, rather than what we currently have. And really, I suppose that's it for most of my thoughts on the Garrison. The main changes from the last video are just that I've progressed a lot more, and I've got the Gladiator Sanctum, which is a fun building on one of my other alts. So look, the Garrison's fine. I think it's a good addition. It's definitely provided a lot of content and things to do, and I overall think that it has been a positive aspect to Warlords of Draenor that I have been having fun with. I guess just like many people, I do think that while it will be fun for the first 2 months, perhaps in the long run it may turn into busy work, so we'll just have to see how that feels as time goes on. And now that's really it in terms of what I want to talk about. As you know, I think the world quests, etc. are all fantastic. I guess I'll just mention that again, I'm happy with no flying. I think it still works out pretty well. And it's kind of opened up the opportunity for things like Aviana's Feather to be cool additions to the game that are actually fun to use. And that feeling of, enjoyment or satisfaction or whatever when you use Aviana's Feather or the Falling Flame and all those clever little things like the Goblin Glider, that wouldn't exist if flying was there. So I just think that it overall works and making it a sort of a larger, more immersive world, and that's all pretty cool. Now, time to talk about Ashran. Ashran has been I'm not going to say it's been a disappointment to me, because I never really thought it was going to be that great anyway. It certainly was better than how it was when I did my initial criticisms during the beta. However, I think that the vast majority of my initial criticisms were pretty on point, and it's something that I think a lot of players are currently experiencing in Ashran. One of the largest problems, though, is of course the technical side. The queues absolutely suck. The whole point of Ashran is that you should be going, or you should be able to go in there while you're waiting for your LFR queue to pop if you just want something to do that's a bit of fun. That can't happen. As for Ashran itself, I just don't think it's particularly great. When Ashran is balanced, it's i.e. both sides are having a good old fight for the middle lane, it's not fun because there's no reward, nothing changes, and zergs of players just turn into bizarre soupy masses of health points and bars that you need to click on. It kind of sucks for melee people. I've been doing it on my paladin, so at least I do have some range capability. However, if I was a purely melee class, I cannot see myself having much fun in Ashran. I think that the bonus objective thingies are fine, they're not particularly interesting, and just overall, Ashran needs more interactivity, it needs more things going on. Cronus and Fangral really need to be rebalanced, because they're a little bit ridiculous. And I just don't think it's that great. I think it missed the point in many different areas. Back in the beta, I actually made this video that was a sort of design proposal idea for some sort of large PvP island, basically like Ashran. And the whole thing, honestly, I still think my idea would have worked far better than what's went on with Ashran, because one of my biggest issues with Ashran is there's no real reward for winning. I mean, yeah, you maybe get some conquest points, but it doesn't feel cool. It doesn't fulfill some sort of epic fantasy. And that really sucks, whereas my version of it had basically, it was a shifting battle where every 3 hours there was a fight for some sort of central fort, and then to the left of the central fort you'd have the Horde base, like the Horde War Spear place, and then to the right you'd have the Alliance base, so Storm Shield. And what would happen is that there would always be the laning, like the push laning gameplay of Ashran as we know it. It would be there during the interim time, but then it would kind of ramp up to being a large siege thingy. Look, it's best just to check that out on the channel. And do bear in mind, it's very much a rough first draft that we need a lot of iteration and stuff like that. But I just think Ashran's a bit disappointing, and from what I've heard from the PvP community, many of them do seem to think that as well. I've just seen a lot of disappointment, really. It's not really anger, it just mainly seems to be people saying, wow, this seemed so cool, yet when I even do get into Ashran, it's just standing around and not really getting any reward. And I don't like the idea that, in Ashran, what you feel like you should be doing is taking the battle to the enemies, crushing their base, killing their leader. That's what gets you the least reward, and what does get you reward is doing these miscellaneous side objectives, which just don't feel like they have any place with the main battle, and they hardly affect the main battle. That's just so unfortunate, and I don't like how the goal of what you as a player feel you should be doing doesn't match up with what rewards you. That's just very, very regrettable. So hopefully in the next expansion, when they try to do another world PvP thingy, they'll get it right. Hopefully, they better have learned something from Ashran. Anyway, that's it for my opinions. Overall, Warlords of Draenor is shaping up to be an excellent expansion. I'm very happy with patch 6.0 as on the whole. I know I've been a bit critical here, but I have had a lot of fun. The reason I critique is simply because if things are criticized, then, people maybe think about those things more, and overall that can lead to things getting better, designs improving, etc, etc, etc. You know the drill. Yeah, it's been a good expansion so far, and hopefully there's going to be some really awesome stuff coming in patches. So that's it for me. Maybe I'll do an update to this video once patch 6.1 and, Blackrock Foundry come out, because I'm sure there'll be some cool stuff going on there. But for now, that is it for the video. Be sure to let me know what you think about the expansion so far down in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.